and going live. Prepare to live stream.
All
Got
right.
it. All right, just going to hold on for a little bit to let
Whoa,
it.
that's so cool. You can stream directly to Facebook from Zoom.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's
But
awesome.
it's only like on my page though. So like unfortunately
Yeah.
I can't stream it to someone else's page unless like you do live on like directly from Facebook, then I think both
Yeah.
can hop on. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty fun.
So I know high tech, high tech. Welcome to AANHPI Heritage Month. I'm really excited to be chatting with my guest today. He is an integrative change worker, facilitating love and intention for people who were never given the opportunities for themselves. So I would like to introduce you to Billy So. Hi, Billy.
Hi.
You're the only male guest who is
Yes.
on my show this month. I actually have asked someone else, but he couldn't make it. So I'm really excited to be talking with you today. So
Yeah.
could you share with everyone what your cultural background is and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Billy Sutter, and I think it's weird. I'm not like I wasn't born here, so I'm not a second generation, but at the same time, like my parents are like the first level immigrants. So I'm kind of in the middle. So I'm 1.5 immigrants.
Mhm.
But in any case, I'm a South Korean citizen, and I recently got my green card like in 2020. So
Oh,
yeah, I went through the
congratulations.
whole, yeah, thank you, the immigration experience, and I started coaching and change work last year. So it's been around a year since I started. And like Claudia mentioned, I primarily help a lot of clients are who never really had the chance to feel and experience being loved and being held. And I sort of walk my clients through the experience of doing that for themselves rather than relying on their parent or other adults who aren't going to give it to them.
When you talk about like for people who have never really been loved, and I feel like it's like very prevalent in the Asian community because
Yeah,
like
yeah,
parents don't really display that affectionate love to their kids,
yeah. And
like
I'm
not
sure you
touchy
can,
feeling.
yeah, I'm sure you can imagine, but there is a lot of Asian clients who come with like, what really saddens me the most is in our approach of coaching, we like to emphasize feelings, right? So when you're feeling bad, like we like to locate it, and then because the feelings are kind of like the gateways to our human experiences. But what really saddens me is when Asian clients come and they have no idea to locate love. They have no idea what it actually feels like. And yeah, that experience, it really saddens me. And when I am able to leave those clients with the feeling of being appreciated by themselves, that's what really makes it really worth it for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you when it comes to Asian clients versus other people who have either done coaching or very expressive and very in touch with their body. Because there are a lot of times when I am also doing the work and I would be like, so how does that feel like? All they can really express is like, it feels good, it feels bad, like, but there is no vocabulary
Mm.
for those things. And I can like I totally understand that because it's like just the testing it out, even just the stepping into that is so scary for them that they hold themselves back from even trying for it.
Yeah.
And so they think maybe, oh, they're doing it wrong. Why? Sometimes I would push them a little bit and they're like, oh, am I doing it wrong? And they kind of freak out. So
Mhm.
it's like it's this mentality of doing it wrong also
Mhm.
because of an Asian mentality of you have to get it right, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And
So
that ties in
oh,
heavily with today's topic, and
yeah, and it
discuss.
does. And it does. So like I was about to jump into it because what we're talking about is about inter-Asian hate. right? So it's such a big, broad topic, and it's a very sensitive topic. So first of all, I would like to ask you to share what is something that happened that made you so like that is the topic that you brought to me that you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. And so when we have these months really highlighting a group, there's a lot of the highlighted group versus all of the others, right? So if it's Black History Month, we want to spotlight all the Black presence, and we want to celebrate the Black experience. And Asian Americans is like a really wide kind of a thing, right? And there are lots of, there's a big emphasis, particularly for the Eastern, Northern Asian countries. And even when we say like AA, like blah, 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 what about like India? Or what about like really South Asia? And what about, like the really East Asia kind of a thing, right? And so what I really wanted to, why I picked this topic is what I think blocks us from having a really collective Asian kind of a voice. One of the big blockers in that is our unconscious prejudices against other Asian people. And it doesn't even have to be across different nationalities. Like plenty of Koreans hate other Koreans. And especially when there's like conflicts historically, like, colonialism and imperialism, needless to say, there is a lot of hard feelings and hatred towards that. But inter-Asian hate because of skin color, inter-Asian hate because of like a tribe that you belong to in your country. And all these different fragmentations are, I think, when these are so unconscious that we don't even realize, we're not really realizing our full potential when we are not recognizing the inter-Asian hate that happens so naturally.
Do you know what? It's so funny because when I was talking to my husband about it, my husband is Filipino, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be talking to Billy about this." It's like, "What do you think?" Right? And then he said, "Yeah, it's just like Filipino against Filipino. It's like just inside ourselves. There's so much things going on. On the outside, it's like there is this facade, but deep inside, it's only when you're in it then you can see all these like class difference, like jealousy of each other, right? It's like not helping each other. There's always cattiness going on. And even for myself, right? Like within the Chinese, like I was born in Hong Kong, raised in Hong Kong, and then came over to Toronto. And then so after China took over, then there's that clash right there. And even like just when I came here to Canada, I was only like 10, 11 years old. And it's like just as a child, right? Like the Chinese kids in the class were trying to like repel me. It was interesting enough. It's like the people who look like me were the people who repelled me. And it wasn't, it's like the backwards of the racism, right? So it was like a very interesting thing for me. That was why for a very long time for myself, I pretty much denounced my whole Chinese identity. It was only these probably year or two, or even with the anti-Asian um, hate going on. And that was when I just started to go back to that. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing when we talk about all these mentality. Yeah.
And what's really funny is we didn't like plan this conversation. Like, I mean, of course, obviously we planned it, but like we didn't like, oh, I'm gonna talk about this, that, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I have the exact same experience. When I came over, so I had a bit of a like going back and forth childhood. So like when I arrived in America in junior high, I was bullied by this white girl, right? And every lunchtime, she would walk up to me and then she would like curse me out in like the most foul Korean words.
Oh.
And I was just kind of dumbfounded, right? Like, what's going on? And then that continued on for like a month, like every day, every lunch, this girl would walk up to me and then just like say these things. And then turns out a group of Korean American girls basically manipulated this white girl, and they chose me as the target because I was very obviously like fresh off the boat back then, because I did come directly from Korea, and like I had that really short buzz cut hair because I was in junior high in Korea, and I was like just exercising my freedom. So like I made it very obvious that I'm this like fresh off the boat guy. So I was proxy bullied by a group of these Korean American girls. And that was like a really like confusing experience for me too. Like I'm being like, what? I would expect like racism from, I mean, I don't know, like it's fucked up that I was kind of like accepted, but like this is coming from like Korean kids. It was so confusing to me. And the key point of this like topic is, really surprisingly, that event didn't really leave a big mark in my life. And when I say this, like it seems like a really big deal, but like when I look back, it wasn't that big of a deal. And the reason for that is my mom made sure that I understood that I wasn't in the wrong here. My mom made me completely understand that this is not your like fault. You're like a Korean kid. And she made it clear to the school administrators that they understood that this was an issue where I wasn't in the wrong. And so having that kind of unconditional support from my mom is what made this experience very kind of a passing thing. So understanding like this experience of like, yeah, so like now we're deep diving into the topic, but hate is an emotion that I think can only originate if there is like something that's so precious to you and something that you want for yourself. So I spent a lot of time thinking like, what's the difference something that I hate and then something I don't hate, right? And so for example, I'm a Korean guy. So it's very deeply ingrained in me to hate Japanese people. And I mean, it's so common in Korea. Like it's ingrained in their DNA.
Yeah, for sure.
So I asked my unconscious reactive self, what's so bad about Japanese people? And then the answer is like, right now, there really isn't. So what are our earlier generations' response to that? Oh, if we are not careful against them, then our freedom will be taken away, right? That implies that this freedom that we hold so dearly is at stake because of this other party. So if this isn't really that precious to me, there's no real reason for me to hate the other party at all.
Yeah.
Because it's a resource thing.
Yeah.
And the unconscious mentality tends to think of every resource as this limited thing, right? So that's why so many wars happened over land, because it's like, oh, if they take this territory, that means we don't have this much, then we need to fight back and take that. But if that like precious nature of like, I want that for myself isn't there, that intent of desire and preciousness isn't there, then hate really has no place.
Yeah.
So what I think is that we need to examine, yeah, currently we hate a lot of things. On the other side of that hate, what is so precious there? So I try to empathize with my bullies. To those Korean American girls, what was so precious to them that my mere presence in the school sparked that much hate? And my experience of growing up with other Korean Americans and interacting with them on a kind of a deeper level is like second generation's identity crisis, right? It's like, I'm an
Can you
American,
explain
but
that a little bit more?
yeah. So like, I'm an American, but I'm not like fully American because I'm like apparently Asian, but I'm not fully Korean because I don't really abide by their mentality. So like a lot of Korean Americans form this identity around like being exclusively the Korean like basically the Korean presence somewhere.
Mm,
And when the real deal, like when the real Korean person, like who's like fresh off the boat comes, then that identity of like, oh, but if I'm not this unique Korean like persona in this school, then what am I? And I noticed that for a lot of Korean Americans, that triggers a lot of scarcity inside of them.
mm,
So in this specific scenario, it is their identity that they are holding very precious to their heart, their personal expression and their personal power. But by the presence of an actual Korean person on the other end, that's feeling threatened. Therefore, I'm going to react to it by hate because that's how I can preserve this really precious thing.
mm,
So my first takeaway is when you really observe hate and see through that hate, what you see is what you really hold on dearly for. And
mhm,
discovering what it is that's so close to your heart, I think that's a really valuable knowledge that you can have to have a really deep bond with yourself.
mm. That's an interesting take in terms of like talking about hate. I was like also when I'm thinking about what I had gone through, just to analyze it a little bit. I think one of the reasons why I didn't want to become Chinese, like I didn't want to identify with the Chinese, is just wanting to belong.
Mhm,
And and as you say, it's the idea of I'm not fully Chinese, and yet I'm not fully Canadian.
mhm,
I don't share any of those things 100%.
mhm,
So so a lot of times I feel like is this exclusion, and and for me it's really interesting, this hate. I don't actually feel that hate. I just feel it from someone, but I'm very much apathetic
mhm,
to it.
mhm,
And I think it has to do with like the opposite of that hate,
mhm,
right? Because you're like it has that very strong feeling that's going on. Yet on the flip side of it, it's like, you know what? I don't feel like I belong, so I'm just going to cut everyone out.
mhm,
So it's like, yeah, so who cares if other people are like this, or who cares if other people are like that? I have my own road to go down, and then
yep,
I start building this wall up so that I can cut everyone out so I don't get hurt.
mhm.
But then of course, like in the journey of doing that, it kind of also blocks out all the connections that I could build with other people too, right?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Yeah.
And that's the implicit danger in all of this, right? So for example, like I'm really sorry if this gets to my coach, but my coach is Japanese.
Mm,
And when my sister referred me to her, like this was my actual reaction. I don't want to get coached by a Japanese person.
mm,
Like that was how much of like this unconscious thing that was like really deeply imprinted
yeah,
into my DNA was.
for sure.
So like there are cases where we just described where it actually affects us from at a personal level, right? But now comes the generation part that Cindy discussed with you too, right? You're gonna find that when you look at hate, like, yeah, why do I hate this group so much? sometimes you're gonna find the side of you that's so precious. Like, oh, turns out I really wanted the sense of community and belonging. Okay, then I'm gonna find other ways of satisfying that desire so that I don't have to, like, I can get rid of this negative emotion. But I can thank it for it, so because it guided me this way. Other times, it has nothing to do with you at all. Oh,
Mhm.
like, turns out my grandma was pissed at the Japanese. Turns out my great grandpa suffered because of Japanese people. And just to highlight some other things, like, like, I'm sure similar stripes are happening like India and Pakistan too, right? And
Mhm.
like Vietnam and surrounding
Oh
like
yeah.
Southeast Asian countries too. So like the same with Philippines too. Like, it's like, but it's all like, oh, it has nothing to do with me. I can
Mhm.
enjoy Japanese sports without guilt. I can enjoy anime without guilt, because on the flip side of that hate is a lot of shame
Mhm. Yeah.
for being so like, this person's also Asian. I want to be close with this person. I have an interest and affinity to this person, but I shouldn't. And there's a lot of shame in that, right?
Yeah.
You're, like you said, you're missing out on so many different experiences that can enrich your life, whether it be personal connections or whether it be cultural experiences, just by holding on to these generational threads that don't really serve us any longer.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And how it ties back to my earlier point is, when you find that you've been kind of pointlessly consumed by hate, you need to let yourself have the permission to be like, hey, just like how my mom did it. Hey, you literally didn't know better.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our generation implanted that to you. And you were at an age where you just accepted things blindly.
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe you could have done some really crappy actions. Maybe you were actively racist against other Asian people. Maybe you were just thinking it in your head. But you have to give yourself the permission to be forgiven,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it was ingrained as from our motherlands. But we are
Yeah.
Americans, we are Canadians, we are the greater community of this like American diaspora.
Mm.
So it doesn't serve us anymore. You don't have to cling on to that hate.
Mm. Mm. I want to really highlight when, like, what your mom did for you was the witnessing that
Yeah.
we've been talking about with David Patrick, right? Like, it's the witnessing of, like, hey, you've been hurt, but you didn't do anything wrong. And she went all out to go to the school, right? Because like for my case, like I didn't tell my mom about any of these. So it was like a silent suffering where I just thought that my identity was wrong.
Yep.
That's why I didn't want to have anything to do with being Chinese, right? So like it's like all these, oh, they didn't like me because I'm Chinese by Chinese people, right?
Mhm.
So then inherently my brain is like, well, then there must be something wrong with this appearance. So then like I worked so hard within 1 year, I started speaking English, right? Like all of these things, I didn't want to have anything to do with Chinese. So it's like that opposite example as we're sharing in this space right now, right? Because like that's the power of just holding that space to say, hey,
Yep.
you were in pain and that wasn't right for them to do what they did.
Yeah. And for us Asian Americans, self-hatred is ultimately another form of Asian hate.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And so we have to be the compassionate witness and witness our pain in this foreign land where we feel so powerless,
Mm.
and where we want to hold on to the things that we desire, but other people have it so much easier on us. How much of how much of this lack are we experiencing? How much are we suffering? We have to be there for us. We have to be there for other Asian people who are going through that similar pain, and may help them realize that this hate is a gateway to a deeper connection
Mm-hmm.
to our bloodline
Mm-hmm.
of Asia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want, yeah, as you were saying, like this self-hate that I imagine what you're talking about is like all these self-criticism, right? Because like it growing up, right, as an Asian culture is always academics, academics, academics. There's always comparison going on. There's always criticism going on. There's always not enough going on. And it turns around that we start beating ourselves up no matter what it is. And I'm the worst person at giving myself compassion. And I always need like a coach or something to hold that space for me, because I just personally still haven't developed that big of a capacity to do it fully yet. I could do a little bit, but not as much. Right. So that's why for me, it was so important for me to have someone there to do this work with me.
Yeah. And, again, I mean, Asian male experience, like cis hetero male experience, completely different from Asian female experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I know that I'm like very in the minority as an Asian male coach. So I really want to emphasize that if you're an Asian male, it's really important that you have to be, as a privileged person, there is a responsibility for you to be a compassionate witness.
Mm-hmm.
And when your sister is being treated differently than you, just because she's a girl, you have to be the ones to speak out against your parents. When your grandparents do that, same thing. When society tells your sister to wear makeup, but you barely wash yourself,
Mm-hmm.
maybe time to recognize that, hey, this might be something weird.
Yeah. And because I was sharing that I just listened to Simone's. Simone is actually Billy's sister, and she's my coach. She on her podcast, she invited three of the cisgender male on her podcast to talk about how patriarchy
Mm-hmm.
had such a big effect on men,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of all these ideas that men has to be strong, has to be like has to take care of everything, and they don't cry, right? So as an Asian man, also it's the same thing. It's the same mentality. It's like the male of the family has to stand strong, protect the family, and they have to be
Care of your
certain way.
parents when they get older.
Yeah, yeah, right. So there's like even the Chinese saying, like the man is supposed to be out there taking over the world,
Mhm.
while women, even like just like not even 100 years ago, like we are kept behind doors, right? We don't know anything about the person that we're going to get married. They may come over to give us to send the parents the dowry, and then we're just peeking behind the door to see how they look like, right?
Yeah.
And then you're all covered until you get married, and then they uncover you on the night of, right? All of these things is so ingrained within our tradition.
Mhm.
And so it is a long way to go to like peel back all of these. And yet I'm so glad that you're doing this work, Billy. And I'm so glad your sister's doing this work. And I'm so glad I'm doing this work.
Yeah, it is like the more we do it, the more we recognize that this ability to peek into the mind and really be conscious of our thoughts is a gift, and it is a privilege. And so I try my best to impart this ability to other people because
Mm,
I know how much of a difference it can make.
mm,
And so, yeah, it will take work to dissemble all that culturally ingrained, and we're all intelligent people, right? We're not maliciously trying to fuck each other up.
mm,
It's historically a lot of things probably made sense, and it probably came from the best intentions. Oh, I want this for myself. Oh, like it all comes from the brain's desire to satisfy. So we can reevaluate if this still is the case. And just like we did with hatred today, and use it as a gateway to find out what we really hold dearly to our heart, we can repeat the process for all the other notions that tend to unconsciously hold us back.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Claudia.
We're wrapping up our episode. Is there one last thing you would like to share with the audience today, Billy?
Like nothing new, but I just want to reiterate the importance of being that compassionate person for yourself. For others is also good, but ultimately, the only person you can control is you. And when you are feeling beaten, when you are feeling hurt, when you are feeling that lack and that scarcity, it's important for you to be that adult for yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much. And if anyone would like to reach out to you, to chat more with you, to get coached by you, how can they find you, Billy?
They can email me at billy@julylifecoach.com, the month July, or my website, julylifecoach.com.
All right. Thank you so much for today. It was
Thank
such
you,
a great
Claudia. Thank
pleasure
you for the
talking to
opportunity.
you. Okay, have a great night.